Hello. So I wanted to make this video about my child developmental research work, mostly for my daughter. My daughter has taken an interest in my child development work, and I want to make this video for her to talk about where I think the work could be expanded further, where I think where more research could be done, and for anyone who is interested in this work. So I am the observant mom. My name is Amber. I document the age-related stages children go through. These are times when children act up at an age-related time, but following this period of turmoil is new growth. And so my work has been capturing the times when children get irritable and then what new growth seems to be happening. So this is what I've been documenting for 5, maybe 6 years now. Now, if you were to ask me, after years and years of this work, what pushes child development? What is the engine behind it? I wouldn't necessarily talk about periods of disarray turning into growth. That happens. But if you were to ask me what drives it, I would tell you imagination. Children's imagination seem to kick off enormous child development. So as I've been doing this work, I've been getting child behavior down to about a 2-week block of time. At first, I would analyze data within a 1 or 2 month block of time. I was starting to realize that's not specific enough. I got too many complaints about my work. And what I realized is there's some subtlety that I was missing, that if I didn't go in and kind of compare, I would be missing it in my work. And so I have years worth of 2-week chunks of time organized into what you would expect to see in that it's 2 week of irritable and then 2 week of pleasant, kind of in general. And I started to notice a pattern, which is that some of the milestones seem to be more imaginative in nature and some of the milestones seem to be more practical in nature, and that they followed this pattern. The children became wildly imaginative and then they were becoming very practical. And so I started to investigate this in a very detailed way. I have Excel charts with stories of children, across children, down to the day from the due date, comparing this story to that and what kind of behaviors you see clustered. And I have years worth of data like this. And I started to notice the pattern. I noticed the pattern in general, but I try to get it very detailed as I look through the data. And what I noticed is that major development seemed to be kicked off mostly by imagination, and coinciding with this new imagination were major sleep disruptions, nightmares, fears, physical growth, a lot of hormonal stuff too, such as increased spit. And this behavior doesn't necessarily coincide with irritable behavior. So, sleep disruptions for parents are annoying, and nightmares are hard to deal with for child and parent. But sometimes these wild imaginations were just highly imaginative at first. It had actually nothing to do with children being irritable. They do get irritable, but the actual kickoff seemed to be something different. So what happens is children become wildly imaginative at first. Now, at first, in the first part of their development, the type of imaginations they have are very similar across all children. So for instance, around 4.5, children think they can fly. Now, it's not quite that they think they can fly. They tend to think they can jump a lot further than they can. But my point is that all children will show it. They'll show somehow, oh, I wish I could jump across this room, or what would happen if I launched this balloon across this, or what if I try to jump over this stream. So that behavior, once you kind of know what to look for, is very identifiable. And this is what I'm saying. This is where the research could be. You could start to collect data from parents of when they see that particular behavior. Another example is in the early 3s, children think they can shrink. They think they can shrink into their tiny little toys. So if you were to collect data on that, on when that happened from the due date, you can start to see patterns. And this is one of the reasons why I'm documenting these hills, because this is the type of behavior that kicks off a hill. Now, the behavior that kicks off a hill is very universal across all children, so it's highly identifiable. As they go up and over the hill, children start to vary widely. So what happens is, at first, what I think happens is that during sleep, something seems to creep into a child. Some type of program seems to get downloaded into their brain, and it causes major sleep disruptions, all that type of thing. But first you see the sleep disruptions and such. But then at first the wild imaginations appear, and these wild imaginations are wild. And they very often develop what I call a hologram. Now, a hologram is something that was projected from their mind out into reality. So their imaginary friends are an example of this. And they have no control over it. It's just an imagination for imagination's sake. There's no it's not a creative solution to something. It's just something gets put in them. And then what happens after this is they go into an intense learning stage. I call this a gathering and sorting stage because that's what they do. They gather things to themselves. They could gather physical objects, or they could gather information. They become a sponge. I read before that research shows that children's chemical makeup shows that they go into these stages where the brain has chemicals that suggest it's learning at very predictable times, and I would guess it would coincide with my work. And then they start to sort the information. There's a this versus that element to it. For instance, and this is driven by wild questioning. For instance, why don't we wear clothes in the pool? You have these wild what if questions, and those type of questions make you see things in a new light. And so some part of reality comes into clearer consciousness for them. I'm arguing that this process is putting consciousness itself into place. That when children are born, the world is a fuzzy haze to them. They don't even, like, at 3 months old, a finger going in front of their eyes is very novel to them. Even the basic objects of reality have to come into consciousness somehow. And I'm arguing this process of imagination followed by curiosity is driving it. After they develop this enormous, after they have all this curiosity, they start to develop clarity, and I call it the clarity stage. And what I think happens is at the beginning of a hill, there is an incredible memory upgrade. And sometimes they tell you about it. They'll tell you, my brain is going 1,000,000 miles an hour, or something happens where they actually talk to you about their brain. What I think happens is at the beginning of the hill, there's a memory capacity increase, and then as they go up the hill, the memory is populated. So as they go up the hill, they develop an enormous amount of knowledge. The stuff that you ask them to do sticks. They remember it. They remember more facts. Now, with this clarity comes creativity. With knowledge, you are more confident to go out and create what you want. The creative stage, when I look for it in my development work, something in reality has to change. They have to develop a new Lego structure or paint a painting or something like that. But this creative stage, they're just doing it to do it. There's no immediate problem. After the creative stage, which by the way is very brief, they go into an application stage where they start to solve problems around them. Maybe water spilled on the floor. Maybe their brother's crying. They start to respond. They're very proud of themselves for doing that as well. And then after all this, there's a refinement stage where they look back on everything they did and go, whoa, I just did all that. They regard themselves, their past selves, as immature and babyish. And they get very hard on themselves as they decide how they're going to proceed forward. So that's the general pattern. I have less than a minute on this video. I have more in my book. My book, Misbehavior's Growth 4-Year-Olds, describes this. I've done my best work so far in my work on 4-year-olds. It describes this pretty well. But my point is that imagination at the beginning, you could start to gather information and do statistics on it and see how it plays out for children. There's a lot more to this about how their imagination evolves over the hill and that type of thing. But this is what I wanted to start doing work on and explaining is these hills, the hills of child development. Again, my website is theobservantmom.com. Thanks for watching.